Welcome to the Music Reel. I'm your host, Nicola Burton. When I think country music in Australia, I think two words, James Blundell. And today I have the legend with me. James, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Nick, and it's a pleasure to be face to face.
It is so good after stalking you for so long. It's lovely to talk to you. Look, you have just come back from a weekend away in Mount Isa. Now the gigs are actually starting again. I wanted to start there to talk about what it was like for you to be playing up there, and more importantly, how did the audiences respond after being so long without live music?
Well, the first part is that I haven't had stage nerves for, I would say, 15, 20 years. But our work, as did everybody else, stopped dead on the 15th of March. We played in Mullumbimby in New South Wales, and then nothing until the 11th of September, where we played in Mount Isa at the theatre up there because that was an open border. And then Mount Isa, we played in Caloundra on Thursday evening, and Mount Isa was the third show in 8 months. And no matter what happens or how much you rely on muscle memory and all the things that go with a performance, which is very different to just sitting around at home playing guitar, got on stage feeling like a teenager again. And it was to comply with the social distancing. It was a seated performance, but yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun, and it was just, I don't know, you forget so much about the core of a live performance is the interaction between the artist and the audience, and vice versa. And it was great. Nobody was allowed to dance, and everybody forgets that. And and by the end of it, you got people who couldn't help themselves, which was great fun. So going, oh, I don't want you to get into trouble. When we played in Caloundra on Thursday night, there were signs well posted around the thing saying a $6,270 fine for dancing. And I thought the world has definitely changed, hasn't it?
Who would have thought that you would be fined an amount of money? Because when you start playing as a muso, you want to get people up and dancing. So it's an opposite of what we're used to doing. So it's just insane. But I'm so glad you're actually out there playing again. It's been such a long time for so many of us. And the Music Reel is telling the story about the decimation of our industry. And there's people with mortgages and businesses and families to feed who can't actually get out there and work the way that they used to. And the ALNBC are predicting that 70% of our businesses will be gone by Christmas if the government doesn't step in and help. So, it's a lot of chatter about what the government needs to do. What are your thoughts on that, James? Given that you've been in this industry for a long time, what do you think is needed to make sure we're not facing this extinction level event?
Well, that's a great way to put it. I'm very fortunate in as much as I've lived my entire adult life in two incredibly fragile industries, which is running a property and completely weather dependent and market dependent, and the music industry, which is, it's fickle at the best of times, but when you're told you actually can't ply your stock in trade, it's a bit of a shock. Again, in the primary industry, Australia is unique, and we have very little government support and assistance, and it's still managed to maintain a high export level and can continue literally against the odds to run profitable businesses. And I think music's very much the same. Australia has always exported a lot of music. We are very innovative, and I've always been proud of us as an industry that our uptake of innovation and tech advance has been one of the most voracious in the world, because we're so used to having to send the music away. It would be wonderful to have a degree of income support for musicians for the very reasons you just articulated, that we're all pretty used to living on a shoestring, but when the shoestring snaps, it's a bleak thing. And if you really want to kill creativity, stress a musician out financially. And that's the next thing that follows is that you either get a series of very, very depressing pieces of music, or you get people who are so busy coping with their day-to-day realities that the creative process stops. So any degree of stability will be of immense benefit to the creative process. I've got a couple of sayings that I've heard over the years that I absolutely adore. One is, imagine your life without its soundtrack. So if you extrapolate that, it's imperative that music continues. Unfortunately for all art, it seems to flourish under duress. So you will find that pieces of music that probably would not have been written in happier times will appear. And that's good in as much as that you'll definitely get the despondent and dark side of the human condition, but you also get this wonderful release. I've always been fascinated by the fact that in global crises, First and Second World Wars, pick a war, any war, that people lean on the arts for their escape. So while while having those stresses is really, really hard to live with, it actually drives the creative process, which sounds like I'm just completely contradicting what I've said before, that it can stop people being creative. But those that keep going through it will usually come up with some pretty unique pieces. So it will be as the French say, for the wine to prosper, the berry must suffer. So the harder you stress your grapes, the better. Isn't it? It's a good one, because things do well under pressure, and arts do well under pressure. And it's pretty much our normal anyway. But any degree of assistance to take any stress off that would be hugely appreciated.
It's so great that you've expressed it that way, because there's so much uncertainty facing us from next year. But I'd like to think that that's an opportunity. I know for every one person on stage, it takes a couple hundred people off stage to make it happen. But where would humanity be without its soundtrack? And the value of that is, you can't actually put a price on that. So I'm hopeful that the governments are actually listening to us and will give us some additional support. But you're right, it's exactly the same as your life on the land, isn't it? It really is, quite similar. And I wanted to actually talk about that. During lockdown, all we did was sit on our phones, right? We were just online. I was watching your social media and I felt so connected to what you were doing, because, I live in the city. It's a fantasy to live in the bush, and you've got these photos of nature and family and the natural cycles of life, and it gave so much comfort to so many people. So I wanted to thank you for that. How do you feel about having that? It's almost, in my perspective, this healthy lifestyle to help you balance the challenge of being a musician while you're in nature.
Very much. There's a couple of answers to that question, and it's very well phrased, the way you've put it. I feel blessed beyond belief to have had that reality to take my mind off the hideous reality of not being able to work. And I feel a bit of survivor guilt, in as much as that, I'd be in 1% of the Australian music industry who have something to do with their time outside, wondering when we're going to be able to play again. Secondly, my fiancée Rebecca, who's was enshrined in a song way back when called Down on the Farm, because we were childhood sweethearts, and then went through our various stages of life and reconnected 37 years later, and aiming to marry in March, April next year, which in itself has been just a wonderful support during this period of time. But she was saying, I'm not quite sure, I can't put my finger on why your social media following has leapt up. It's because there's been no great output of music, and we discussed it at length, and you've said exactly what we arrived at, that it created a consistent uplifting reality that's very simple. And I think one of the things we'll all take out of this period of time is getting back to what makes a happy life and what's necessary to be fulfilled. And I've been very concerned. One of the pieces of music forthcoming in the next body of work is a song called Jack and Jill that I started to write years and years ago, about the fact that mankind, the race had pretty much painted itself into a corner where it was all atavism and all material satisfaction, and all the basic fulfillments of personal happiness and family strength and a lot of very traditional values had been displaced. And this period of time, for all the horror it's brought, has really shone a light on the value of a simple, fulfilled existence, as opposed to forever chasing the big brass ring that seems to be perpetually out of reach. I had another great blessing in the 8 months of no work, in as much as it coincided with the end of my father's life, and he and I were very, very close. And I had two aims this year: was to get him past his 84th birthday, which is on the 19th of February, and to get him through winter, because he'd had a round of pneumonia during the summer of the year before, and I was concerned that we were going to lose him then. But in effect, I wound up spending the last 8 months of his life with him on a day-to-day basis, in his full care, including having him home from hospitalisation that we thought might be the end, and then we had him home for a small period of time prior to going back into a facility that was the end of his life. But without what's happened during COVID, I would have been away for half, if not 2/3 of that. So to my dying day, I'll regard that as a gift of immeasurable proportion. So for those two reasons, I'd probably be one of the few people who would look at COVID and say that it's actually brought some incredible blessings. The flip side of that is that there was 22 days right towards the end of his life when I couldn't see him because he was in a facility that just you could not enter. But then again, I was one of thousands of families going through the same thing. And when we proceeded to plan his funeral, we were only allowed 10 people at the start, and then in the first week of planning that jumped to 30. By the time the funeral took place, we could have had 100 people there, but you can't do that on the run. It's not something, there's quite a bit of preparation goes into that final tribute, and that made it very special too. The people that attended that were the nucleus of the people he'd loved most throughout his life, and thankfully the facility that went through had been dealing with COVID for the entire pandemic, so they had a great streaming service so we could invite people to watch it there. But I will never forget the fact that I had that period of time with him that wouldn't have been possible if I'd been doing 3 out of 4 weeks a month.
How beautiful is that? I bet he was just also, it gave him the ability to pass peacefully because he had that time with you. And that's the thing about your story. It was so raw, so authentic, and it gave us hope that there is a life outside of the craziness that we've been living in the last, few years. So, I think that some of the photos that you posted, they're like album covers. I don't know who's taking these covers. They're incredible. For me at least, I felt such comfort from looking at these photos. So it sort of made me think, what are you worried about? Look at the beauty of nature out there. Look at what we've actually got for free.
What you've put your finger on is actually the thing that has been the most gratifying in a 33-year career, in as much as that I think the purpose of art is to communicate. All throughout the entire 33 years, I've always tried to write music that included people in or help them think outside their realities and make them realize their options. One of the most beneficial comments that people have made over the years is, look, I was going through a really bad period of time and one of your pieces of music really helped me. And what we've just been discussing is a big extrapolation of that. It's got the vision that goes with it. And we were blessed. There was not long after that had passed, we were preparing stuff for the funeral, and we were greasing his saddle, which was the only saddle he'd ever had. He'd bought it when he was a 22-year-old and rode in it until he stopped riding. And as Beck was taking that photo, a rainbow literally came down in the background, and you couldn't script that shot if you tried. So it became a really valuable part of the whole process because we felt it was a sign that things were okay at his end. And
thinking about it. Look, talking about photographs, I was speaking to Buzz Bidstrup yesterday. You remember Buzz?
One of my dearest friends. I love Buzz and don't see anything like enough of him.
He said to me, whenever he sees a puffy white shirt, he thinks of you. Do you know that?
I certainly do.
You want to tell that story?
Oh, that's great. He's always been a very, very funny man. And funnily enough, his name has been floating around the house for a lot recently because my oldest son, who plays in the Briar, has been going back through back catalogue and wants to know who all the players were. And he never knew, because Buzz played drums on my first album, and it's incredibly good. He's a very good player. And then when Briar found out that he was both the drummer in the Angels and Gangajang, Briar saw, from a young artist's point of view, it was a great illustration about how broad a person's musicality can be. So Buzz is a very important person in my life, make no mistake, and I'll have to take him up on that. I shot an album cover for an album called Amsterdam Breakfast, and it was a departure album. And I caught some flack for that because it was dressed in a really, really lovely black suit, cradling my oldest son, the bloke I was just talking about, in a sort of a throne-like armchair with a puffy white shirt. It's a long way from what you're seeing today, which is actually who I am.
Exactly. No, I love it. And look, James, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been great to hear your perspective. I think a lot of people will feel such hope after listening to the way you've described your last 8 months. Now, anyone who wants to see James, he's actually performing this coming Saturday at the Strand Hotel in Yeppoon. And we're lucky that our borders are closed because we get to keep you for a few months until they're open, which is great. So anyone who wants to see James, it's the Strand Hotel in Yeppoon this Saturday. James, I'm so glad we actually finally got to have this chat. I really appreciate you adding your voice to this conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure, Nikki, and you're doing a wonderful job bringing all this to people's attention, because it's been a tough time for a lot of people, not just the music industry, and we're all in it together.
We're all in it together. See you next time, James.